All right, folks. Uh, Buckle up for some seriously fucked up shit today. We're diving deep into the judge's trial. You know the Nazi legal system?
Yeah.
Those assholes in robes who twisted the law enable the whole goddamn Holocaust.
Right.
It's like what happens when the people supposed to be upholding justice are the ones turning it into a weapon, you know?
It's a chilling example, really. How a system meant to protect the innocent gets completely corrupted.
Adopted.
Yeah, and manipulated to serve a horrific ideology.
We've all heard about Nuremberg,
Yeah.
right? Big shot Nazis getting their comeuppance. But this one's different.
Yeah.
This time, it's not the generals or the politicians in the hot seat. It's the fucking judges themselves.
The judges.
16 lawyers and judges.
Wow.
The legal masterminds behind the whole damn Nazi machine.
These were the guys who actually created the legal framework that allowed all those atrocities to happen. They weren't, directly killing people,
Right.
but they were crafting the laws, issuing the rulings, making sure the legal system itself
Became a weapon.
became a weapon against anyone they deemed an enemy of the state.
Cut the crap. These motherfuckers are charged with conspiracy, war crimes, crimes against humanity, the whole 9 yards, enabling mass murder,
Yeah.
torture, theft, and of course that whole insane racial purity bullshit. And they did it all under this guise of legality.
Under the law. Like, take the Nuremberg laws, for example.
Right.
These laws stripped Jews of their citizenship,
Stripped them.
their basic human rights, and that set the stage for systematic persecution. These judges, they were instrumental in drafting those laws, enforcing them, turning the legal system
Into a tool of oppression.
Exactly.
So we're talking about some serious legal heavy hitters here.
Oh, yeah.
Franz Schlegelberger, acting Minister of Justice.
Wow.
Kurt Rothenberger, State Secretary of Justice. These guys were at the top
Top of the food chain.
of the Nazi legal food chain.
Absolutely.
But here's the kicker, right? The real top dogs, like Hitler's Minister of Justice. They conveniently croaked before they could face justice.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
Did they get off scot-free?
It certainly raises questions about, the limits of international law.
Right.
Can it really hold the most powerful figures accountable?
Right.
Or do the real masterminds behind these atrocities often escape?
Let's get into the courtroom. This shit show went down for months. The trial itself
Oh, yeah.
was filled with chilling details
Oh, I bet.
about the specific cases these judges ruled on, the justifications they used, the sheer scale of the injustice they enabled. It's enough to make your blood boil.
One thing that stood out to me was that they actually dropped the conspiracy charge.
What?
He claimed it was outside their jurisdiction.
You're shitting me. These guys were clearly working together to orchestrate a genocide.
Yeah.
And they get off on a technicality. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's a fascinating legal point. Judge Blair, one of the judges on the tribunal, was so pissed off.
He wrote a whole dissenting opinion. He argued that the evidence clearly showed a coordinated effort to use the legal system for criminal purposes.
So even in a trial specifically designed to address these crimes, jurisdictional issues can prevent full accountability. What does that tell us about the effectiveness of international law in dealing with truly massive systematic evil?
It's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does international law actually have the teeth to deal with these kinds of complexities? Or are there inherent limitations that let some people escape true justice?
Let's not forget the verdicts.
Right.
Guilty, yes. But the sentences were all over the map.
Oh, yeah.
Some got life, others got a few years. A slap on the wrist for orchestrating a goddamn genocide.
It's crazy.
Most were out by the early 50s living their best lives. Some even got fat retirement pensions. Justice served. Bullshit.
The fact that some of these individuals were able to reintegrate into society, even benefit from the system that they helped corrupt.
It's fucked up.
It's disturbing. It's a reminder of how hard it can be to achieve true justice, and accountability for these crimes.
And now there's one asshole who deserves a special shout out.
Yeah.
Oswald Rothog. This piece of shit was the poster boy for Nazi cruelty on the bench. The court even called him, get this, sadistic and evil. This wasn't just about upholding fucked up laws.
Yeah.
This was about using the law to crush anyone who even looked at the Nazi regime the wrong way.
Rothog is like He's crucial for understanding how the law can be totally perverted
Subverted.
to serve an ideology. He
Right.
wasn't just following orders. He
Yeah.
seemed to relish in the cruelty, in the power he had over other people's lives. He embodies the absolute corruption of the justice system, the transformation of a judge from, an impartial arbiter of justice into an instrument of state-sponsored terror.
This motherfucker went above and beyond the call of Nazi duty. And what's even more fucked up is that a lot of these judges, like Rothog, they weren't just some fringe lunatics, right? They were respected legal minds before the Nazis came along. How the hell does that happen? How do people twist themselves into believing this shit is okay? How do seemingly intelligent people become complicit in such evil?
It's a complex question, and a disturbing one. It makes you think about the nature of power, the allure of ideology, how easily seemingly good people can be corrupted.
It's fucked up, man. Makes you question the whole damn system. If these supposed pillars of justice can become complicit in such evil, what does that say about human nature? About the fragility of the institutions we rely on to protect us? What safeguards are really in place?
It's a sobering thought, and it shows how important vigilance is, questioning authority, holding those in power accountable. We can't afford to be complacent, to assume that systems designed to protect us will always do so. We have a responsibility to be critical, to speak out against injustice, to make sure that the horrors of the past aren't repeated. But how do we ensure that? Where do we even begin?
Damn right. So what can we learn from all this shit? How do we make sure the law is used to protect the innocent, not as a weapon for the powerful? How do we prevent another Rothog from rising to power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think the first step is recognizing that justice isn't passive. It's something we have to actively fight for, to safeguard. We need to be aware of how legal systems can be manipulated, to be critical of those in power, to demand transparency and accountability. And we need to be willing to speak out against injustice wherever we see it, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient it might be. But that's easier said than done, right? What concrete steps can we take?
Easier said than done, my friend. But you're right. We can't just sit back and assume everything's going to be hunky-dory. We got to keep our eyes open and call out bullshit when we see it. Otherwise, we're just setting ourselves up for another round of this Nazi-level fuckery.
Exactly. And I think it's crucial to remember that justice isn't just about punishing the guilty.
Right.
It's also about preventing future atrocities. Education, awareness, critical thinking. These are the tools we need to build a more just and equitable world.
Right.
But how do we ensure those tools are used effectively? How do we prevent them from being corrupted or manipulated? It's a constant struggle, But I think it starts with us recognizing the patterns, the warning signs of corruption, abuse of power. We've seen how easily, seemingly legitimate systems can be twisted. How ideology can blind even the most intelligent minds.
Yeah, these Nazi judges weren't just some, backwoods morons, right? They were educated, they were experts, and that's what's so fucking terrifying, It shows that anyone, no matter how intelligent, how high up they are, they can be seduced by power, by ideology, by that allure of, the greater good. How do we protect ourselves from that kind of thinking? From those who think they're, above the law?
Above morality. It's about recognizing that absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Right.
We need systems that check that power, that hold those in authority accountable. Transparency, oversight, a willingness to challenge those who think they've got the monopoly on truth and justice.
Thinking about this whole racial purity bullshit the Nazis were obsessed with, it's mind-boggling. How they managed to convince so many people that this insane ideology was actually legitimate. It's like they brainwashed an entire nation, What the fuck? How do you even begin to dismantle that kind of widespread delusion?
Propaganda is a powerful tool, especially when it's mixed with fear and hatred and this desire for simple answers to complex problems. The Nazis, they were masters at manipulating information, controlling the narrative, silencing dissent. They created this whole climate of fear where if you questioned the party line, it was like treason, it was dangerous.
And it's not like that shit just disappeared after the war, right? We see echoes of that same kind of thinking today. Racism, xenophobia, the whole us versus them mentality that fuels so much conflict and division. It's like humanity has this built-in tendency to scapegoat, to find an other to blame for all its problems. How do we break that cycle, man? How do we create a culture of empathy and understanding in a world that just seems to be getting more and more polarized?
It's a constant battle, that's for sure. But I think it begins with education. with critical thinking, with like being aware of our own biases and the ways they can be exploited. We need to be able to see propaganda when it's right there in front of us,
Yeah.
to question the narratives we're being fed, and to seek out like diverse perspectives.
So what's the takeaway from all this shit? What do we do with this knowledge? How do we prevent history from repeating itself? Because let's be real, this isn't just about Nazi Germany, is it? This kind of shit can happen anywhere, anytime, if the conditions are right.
I think the most important thing is to never forget the lessons of the past, to study history, to understand how systems of oppression, they're built, they're maintained, to recognize the warning signs of tyranny and injustice. It's about being vigilant, engaged, willing to speak out against injustice, wherever we see it.
Yeah, we can't just like bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best. We got to be informed, we got to be engaged.
Yeah.
And ready to fight for what's right. But that takes courage, doesn't it? Because let's face it, speaking truth to power, that can be risky. You could lose friends, you could lose your job, you could even end up in jail. So how do we foster that kind of courage? How do we create a culture where speaking truth to power isn't just like tolerated, but it's encouraged?
It's about building communities, communities of support, finding people who think like you, who are committed to justice, to accountability. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in this fight. There are so many people working to create a more just world, a more equitable world.
All right, let's kind of shift gears here a bit. We've talked a lot about like the big picture, right? The systems, the ideologies, the historical context. But what about the individuals, the people involved in these trials? We talked about Rothog, but there were 15 other judges on trial. Were they all equally guilty? Were any of them like genuinely conflicted,
Yeah.
struggling with their conscience as they carried out these orders?
It's hard to say for sure what was going on in the minds of these people. The trial records give us some clues, but they're limited. We can look at their actions, their rulings, the reasons they gave, but we can never fully understand their internal struggles, their motivations.
But there must have been some differences in their levels of involvement, right? And how much they really believed in this Nazi project. Some must have been true believers, fanatics, who embraced the ideology like wholeheartedly, while others might have been more pragmatic, going along with it out of fear or self-preservation. So how do we make those distinctions? Is it even fair to try?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. I think it's important to understand that human behavior is rarely driven by pure good or pure evil, right? It's often a mix of motivations, pressures, rationalizations. Some might have been deeply committed to Nazi ideology, while others might have been more willing to compromise their morals to protect their careers, their families, even their own survival.
It's like trying to untangle a giant knot, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got ideology, ambition, fear, conformity, all these threads weaving together to create this tapestry of horror. And then you add the complexities of individual psychology, how people compartmentalize their actions, rationalize their choices, and convince themselves that they're not really responsible. It's enough to make your head spin,
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most challenging things about understanding these events, grappling with the question of like individual culpability. It's easy to condemn the obvious monsters, the Rothogs of the world. But what about those who are more complicit, more passive, more willing to just turn a blind eye?
It's like that old saying, right? All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. But how do we define good in a context like this? How do we measure complicity? The ways in which people contribute to a system of oppression without actually like taking part in the worst acts.
It's a slippery slope for
Yes.
sure. And it's important to remember that we're all susceptible to these pressures, to these temptations to like compromise our morals for convenience or comfort or self-interest. It's a constant challenge to examine our own choices, our own actions, and to ask ourselves, am I doing enough to fight against injustice? Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution?
It's a tough question, right? It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Like, what can we do? Just regular people against these massive systems of power. So where the hell do we even start?
You're right, it can feel daunting, but I think the important thing is to remember change often starts small, at the grassroots. It's about being active in your community, holding your elected officials accountable, supporting organizations that are out there actually fighting for justice and equality.
Okay, but let's get real for a second. Most people are just trying to get through the day, pay their bills, keep their heads above water. They don't have time to become like full-blown activists, right?
Right.
So what can people do in their daily lives to make a difference? What are some small things, but meaningful that anyone can do?
It can be as simple as staying informed. Read critically, have those tough conversations with your family and friends who maybe are stuck in those harmful stereotypes or ideologies. It's about using your voice, using your vote, even like where you spend your money,
Uh,
supporting businesses, institutions that are actually aligned with your values.
I was thinking about that whole racial purity crap the Nazis were so obsessed with. It's just mind-boggling how they got so many people to believe that garbage was legit. Like they tapped into some deep-seated fear, some kind of primal prejudice that's just lurking beneath the surface of even like supposedly civilized societies. How do you address that, man? How do you root out those insidious beliefs that lead to such horrific shit?
It's a tough challenge, no doubt. But I think education is key, teaching people to think critically, promoting empathy and understanding of other cultures, other perspectives, and really exposing the lies and distortions that fuel prejudice and discrimination.
But education takes time, right? And meanwhile, we've got all this hate and intolerance bubbling up everywhere. Politicians exploiting fear, social media algorithms pushing the most extreme voices, and a whole generation growing up immersed in this like toxic online world. How do we counter that? How do we keep this shit from spiraling out of control?
It's a multifaceted problem, right? So it needs a multifaceted approach. We need to hold social media companies responsible for the crap they allow on their platforms, support independent media and journalism, places that actually provide accurate, unbiased information, and promote, like, civil discourse, respectful dialogue, even with people we disagree with.
All right, let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the horrors of that judge's trial to the bigger questions about justice and accountability and the struggle against tyranny and oppression. It's heavy stuff, but it's important stuff. So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to never underestimate the power of individual action. Even small acts of resistance, speaking out, standing up for what's right, it can make a difference. We can't be complacent. We can't assume someone else will fix these problems for us. We all have a part to play in building a more just and equitable world.
Damn right. Well, that's a lot to think about. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today. And to all our listeners out there, stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let the bastards get you down.